Hi, guys. Welcome to season 2 of It's Okay Until It's Not. And today we wanted to get down and dirty, raw and authentic, and we wanted to talk about taking responsibility,
Uh-huh.
truly owning your shit, taking responsibility, looking at yourself in the mirror until it feels really uncomfortable, and then keep looking even longer. So that's what we want to talk about today.
We're dangerous.
We're dangerous. I
Just so
know.
many things I feel like have come up for me in this last week that when I suggested this topic to you, because I've experienced a lot of people in the periphery who are um, not. Um, and it bothers me in a way, and I offer. So like I'm not afraid to offer to people, okay, great. I understand that you're upset about something and you're trying to blame everything else in the world, but it could very well be something outside, but if it's affecting you, there has to be some sort of like responsibility taken, so therefore you can empower yourself around these actions. So it's not like it's not my fault that, you know insert whatever crazy tragedy. It's not my fault COVID is happening, right? But there is a portion of about COVID I can take responsibility for, so I feel empowered within my being. So like, no matter what it is that you find yourself on the edge of complaining about, or talk, whether it's a personal relationship or something about yourself specifically, or the world around you, like there's always something that can be taken responsibility for. So I'm good about nudging, poking, so much as baby stabbing a little, the offer of taking responsibility. And I feel
Mhm.
like what I've gotten a lot response of is so many defenses. So I think the first thing we probably should talk about is the need to defend ourselves in situations like that, maybe when it comes time to having the moment where you could just pause instead of defend, right? Like, what's this
Mhm.
person saying? Even though it might sound like a jab, okay, great. Now what? Right? Like, there's got to be some kind of pause and reflect in that moment where it is uncomfortable, and where you say look in the mirror, like that's the mirror moment. So it could be out in the world, you still have to look in the mirror,
Mhm.
right?
It's always taking that pause before we react to anything
Yeah.
and seeing what it is we need to see for ourselves.
Yeah,
For
exactly.
sure.
So like, if I'm in a conversation with my boyfriend and he starts pointing the finger, here's how it sounds. You make me feel like shit, right? Like something to that degree. You make me feel like shit. And I'm using him as the example of not taking the responsibility. The conversation could easily start with, instead of you make me feel like shit because he's blaming me, it could be, I feel like shit when you do X, Y, and Z. So therefore, he's already taken responsibility for just feeling like shit. And it has something to do with my actions, which technically means dig a little deeper and find out why my actions are bothering you so much. And then, is it my responsibility to completely change myself so that you're more comfortable? Or can you just be
Hmm.
and wonder why you're uncomfortable, and then perhaps start to dig into that? But it starts with, change maybe your phrasing. I feel like shit when I can't dispute you feeling like shit. That's just how you feel. Okay. So here, now you're empowered with owning how you feel, instead of so and so makes me feel like shit, and then I
Hmm.
think, why are you giving so and so so much power? Like, why am I
Right.
so the all powerful over you right now?
So what I hear you saying is, and part of taking responsibility is also you have to start to own stuff first.
Right.
And then we become very defensive and deflective. So we become defensive and deflective. So if somebody were to say, I don't even know where to start taking responsibility in my life, I would encourage you to go back and feel like, where do you feel defensive? Where do you feel it in your stomach? As soon as somebody says something to you, from my experience, you normally feel it in your stomach and your gut, our control center, our
Yeah.
solar plexus, our powerhouse. And so when we feel like we've lost some sense of control, that's when we want to deflect or to blame. And so that's that pause. That's when you need to take that pause.
Yep. I know a lot of people who might even rebut this specific conversation because a lot of people I've heard have been raised in families who were told to find basically somebody to blame. I know that each family member or each family that I've spoken to about this before has a way of better saying that it's, there's always has to be a victim and a victor, right? There always has to be in a story. And so if you feel a certain way, then clearly something must be doing that to you. And so here's, another place where you can start looking into old stories and old beliefs, because that's how your life can change profoundly, is just by owning the story of where you've learned this behavior from, because it's just not working. I don't feel like
Right.
any
And
victims are
well, and I hear what you say. I mean, let's say there's a lady and she's walking down the street and a man grabs her and then he rapes her and steals her purse.
right.
She was she truly was a victim. Or
Correct.
like in Will's accident, yes, he was truly a victim. I think what we're saying is more owning them. Then what do you do?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not saying I'm owning that this happened to me, but I'm owning how I feel about it, how I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to react to it, and what I'm going to do different, proactively. I'm always going to take Mace with me, whatever that may be.
Right.
Right. So
Right. Exactly. That's
so
exactly it.
yeah, so there still can be a victim and a
Victor.
assaulter,
Yeah. Yeah.
or victor, I saying, but we still have to go in and own us, own ourselves through
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. I read something not too long ago that said, oh, it's probably been a long time ago. I should probably clarify, but it resonates with me so well, is that um, everything in this world is neutral. Our response to it is what creates the heightened awareness of certain sensations or feelings within us, right? So like the world just is, and some people don't have a problem killing, and I mean that in like food to eat or bugs on the street, or shoot, even the neighbor whose music is too loud. Like that happens. We can't deny that. It's on the news all the time. But if it's not my passion, or if it doesn't upset me, like I'm not going to pay as much attention to those things, for those things don't affect the way that I am in life. But starving children
Mm-hmm.
bothers me. But all of this stuff is constantly happening, and it's what we pay attention to, right? That gives us this move and this drive to be alive, to do something different, to grow,
Mm-hmm.
to excel or empower. And so those are the things that are going to start nudging. And I feel like the answer, if you are interested in any sort of Buddhist teachings, or have heard them, is that everything is okay. Like that's the whole point of this podcast, is that
Mm-hmm.
everything it's okay. It doesn't mean I like it, but it's okay. Like it's one of those, I can't understand why somebody is gay or transgender, like doesn't affect my life any. I appreciate and love them for who they are and their struggles that they're going through, and I'm just not moved. And there are people losing their minds over this, and it's not them or their child or something, like, you know what I mean? Like it's such a strange. So those are the things. Start asking yourself why and where's my responsibility in this. And these are very big topics, but the little things at home too, like the toilet paper roll. The toilet paper roll bothers the bejesus out of me. And when I realized that it bothers me so much that I had to
Mm-hmm.
like overtly explain myself so many times, it's because it's a representation of perhaps somebody not caring enough about me to do the small things around the house,
Mm-hmm.
to
Mm-hmm.
express love or concern or care, all that stuff. So it's a big dig deep session of sorts, but it's certainly the most empowering thing I've ever done in my
Mm-hmm.
entire life, to start taking responsibility.
I think when we start to take responsibility too, it's really important to model that, to share that with people, because that to me is what then facilitates some change. So for example, if you're having an argument with a friend or a spouse or a family member, like my mom, for example, and I've done something and reflected on it later to hurt their feelings, even going and taking responsibility, like I understand that we just, and this is very hard for people to actually go and sit in front of somebody and say, I messed up and it won't happen again. And I've also noticed that when people are saying I messed up, it's even harder for them to say exactly what they did to mess up. You know, like I didn't truly listen to your feelings. I reacted, I heard something I didn't like, and I just spewed right back at you. So I think a huge part of taking responsibility is saying it out loud so that you can hear yourself say it. And I guarantee you're going to feel it in your gut because you're saying out loud, I was wrong. I totally messed up. And here's what I did wrong. That's just innately hard for us humans to do. And as a parent and a teacher, I found it really productive to do it in front of my class.
Yes.
So
Yes.
for example, in my class, one of my behavior management techniques was going to time out. But it wasn't just time out. When they were in timeout, I had a self-reflection paper that they had to fill out. The time of day, what happened beforehand. That way we could see if there was an antecedent so that the behaviors didn't continue to happen. What was my behavior? There was a space, either draw a picture or write words, depending on what they could do. And then what will I do next time so that it doesn't happen again? And I started this with children in third grade, very young, so they could start to reflect, not just go to timeout, set the timer and come back, but actually let's have now some time to reflect on this. And what are we going to do next time to teach our children really young to take responsibility for their actions, for their feelings, and to be able to verbalize that and not feel shame around that.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if anybody listening right now stopped and thought about the last time they genuinely said sorry
Mm-hmm.
or acknowledged a wrongdoing, or not so much, because I always ask my students, this is how does it feel when you're wrong? And everyone's like shit. And the
Mm-hmm.
fact is it doesn't feel like shit when you do something wrong. It feels like shit when you find out you did something wrong, because I really don't think people's behavior initially is with the intent to hurt. Matter of fact, I always teach this, is that people don't intend to hurt someone else, they just intend to preserve themselves. And I feel
Yes.
like just that separation is, if we're not others centered and we're not considering how we affect others, then you're just constantly in self-preservation and keeping yourself from being hurt, that it's very much
Mm-hmm.
hurting and damaging other people without your intention.
Mm-hmm. And
um
then seeing yourself in that other light,
yeah.
literally seeing yourself as a person that hurt another person, and taking responsibility for that is very hard for us. It takes a lot of humility.
Yeah.
And I think that's where a lot of inner growth and strength comes, because afterwards, I guarantee you won't feel defeated anymore. You're going to feel proud of yourself. And the conversation will completely shift, and you'll start to be able to practice conflict resolution.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yes. Problem solved.
There you go. But
If you
it takes
happen
a
to
lot of
be,
self-love. Like, to me, this is also self-love.
yeah, very much so.
Is, I mean, it hurts and it's hard, and you think that you're looking at yourself, but you're not in a negative light, I guess. Like, oh, I made a mistake. Instead, you're saying, okay, I'm actually going to own this. I'm going to say this out loud, and I'm proud of myself for doing it.
Yeah. If you're actually in the presence of somebody, like, which we've removed, I mean, this last year has been pretty difficult for doing that, but I know this happens within the four walls of our own homes with our family members. But if you're within the presence of somebody and you say something, if I say something to you, Laura, like, because I can see you on this, and I say, that's an interesting sweater, without like, and I mean, that's interesting, but if I watch Laura's face turn sour or questionable,
Hmm.
it's more important for me to say, oh, did that offend you? Like, did you hear that wrong? Or it's equally as important for Laura to say, did you mean that offensively? So we can immediately start a conversation. This, like, oof, that hurt, because maybe you were iffy about the way your sweater looked to begin with. Or maybe you're really confident about the sweater and I just threw a wrench in it because of my words. Like,
Right.
I was just like, oh, that's interesting. I actually can barely see it. But the point is the conversation
Mm-hmm.
can go on instead of you turning around and telling your entire
Mhm.
family that Jamie just shit all over your sweater on
Right.
air so other people could hear. You know what I mean?
Right. It's important to ask those questions for sure, because we internalize everything. And so getting to the point where we don't take things personally, we just get curious and we ask those questions. And that's why I love that book, The Four Agreements, so much,
Yes.
because I
Oh,
feel
yes.
like it's very easy to remember. It's very easy to read. It's not a book that's like you have to read from the beginning to the end. You can just flip through an agreement when you need a reminder.
Yeah.
um and you can, so there, it's being impeccable with your word, and that includes with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that we think, oh, just tell the truth, but I mean, like, to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And don't take anything personally.
Mm-hmm.
And see how many times have I read this book, and I actually do have it on my nightstand. I've given it to so many people,
Mm-hmm.
and I cannot think of the last two agreements right now.
Mine's sitting right over there. I could go grab it if you want. Um, or I could just Google it. But uh, the don't take anything personal. Is it assumptions? Hold on, let me look.
Oh yes, make no
Make no
assumptions,
assumptions. Yeah, and
be impeccable with your word, and don't take anything personally, which, don't take anything personally and don't make assumptions, to me really go together. I mean, when you read the book, they'll separate them, but
yeah,
instead get curious and ask questions. And that includes, with yourself, when you feel yourself reacting defensively, really get curious and ask some questions.
and always do your best is the fourth.
Yes, always do your best.
Yeah. My mother, whom means always so well, is the queen of assumptions, where it like leaves gaps in. It's hard because I've been her daughter so long that I understand that what she is
From the beginning.
assuming from the beginning, from that I I understand her assumptions, but what she's getting is because I'm not always there to clean up her assumptions or to clarify them for her, because
Mm-hmm.
I purposely leave no stone unturned. I know if anybody's listening who's an actual friend of mine, I tell elaborate stories and I miss no details. And I, on purpose, right? Like if you're not going to ask the questions, I'm just going to tell you anyway, because I don't want it to be misunderstood. Like that's my thing in life, is I like to understand and I like to be understood. But so she will even start a sentence, well, I just assumed. And I think to
Mm-hmm.
myself, like, it makes me shudder. And I said, so why don't you ask me the question? And the first answer she's ever given me is like, she doesn't have the dialogue. She doesn't know what to say. And I know you and I are going to have this topic soon, but it's time to get into having difficult conversations. So for her to build up enough courage to ask a clarifying question, that she's already assumed what the answer is, because we kind of catastrophize things. So in her
Yeah.
head, if I can't go over there at 12, it's clear I must be doing something more important.
Mm-hmm.
I could go over at 12:30. She just never asked, is there a better time for you? Like this is the craziness. It's like I have to offer.
Mm-hmm.
I can't make it a 12, mom, but would 12:30 work? Like it has to be like that for so long. I've clearly aided and abetted her
I think it's a
assumptions.
generational thing, though, too, because
Yeah,
in my mind, when I think of any family member, um, older than myself, really, that's just how we did things. And I think it's like, when you know better, you do better. And
sure.
collectively, as this information has been coming out, there's more books about it. We have the internet. We have a lot of people speaking, including you and I, and therapists, that the information's more readily available. And so the more that we talk about it and we put the information out there, hopefully we'll keep getting better. And then by the time my daughter's generation is out here teaching, who knows what we'll learn,
It's
and that's
true.
the beauty of the whole thing. So making assumptions is huge. And then getting them to even take responsibility, holding to, I would like it if you would stop making these assumptions and just ask me a question. If you'd like me here earlier, ask me, can I be here earlier? Rather
Right.
than take up all that bandwidth. and thinking nonstop, on it could have been this, it could have been that. Wow, it would have been really nice if it could have been earlier. It would save so much emotions and time and miscommunications.
Yeah. A lot of the times, funny enough, that I've suggested that we go into these deeper conversations, in her mind, she has already
Uh-huh.
thought that she has asked them, which is, you know what I mean? Like it's a challenging, it's a real challenging
That's so,
place.
so then it would almost come to the next step. I'm just thinking my teacher mind, what I would do if a child told me that over and over. I would make them write it down. Then when you ask me the question, write it down. So then I have some physical evidence.
Nice.
I
Yeah.
used to do this with my kids when they would say, you never told me to do that. That was their famous lines. No, you never told me to do that. When I know I heard myself tell them to do that. So we had to then, I would tell them to do that. And then I had to say, okay, what did I just say? Okay, what did I just say? Okay, let's write it down on the whiteboard. That way there's not a miscommunication. And later you didn't tell me to do that. And
Right.
then we'll put a check mark by
Right. Check. Told you. Told you so.
it. Yes, check. And do we agree now that I told you? And do we physically see it and hear it?
Yeah. All the senses are covered.
Yeah, because I didn't realize, being a parent, of course, I would do that with my classroom, always managing all these different children, keeping them on task and with centers. And on top of that, I taught children with learning difficulties, so a lot of them had ADD or ADHD and would forget. And I understand that because I think I might be right there. I'm sure Jamie agrees too. And as I was
Yes.
parenting, I realized this isn't just a special needs thing. This is just a human thing that we need to be reminded and to see it.
Yeah, and what you're saying, like by being a teacher, you're with them somewhere between, depending on what, grade or how often, but like between an
Yeah.
hour to 8 hours a day, right? And so you might be the only one teaching that quality. So to not be held responsible for anything in their own home, to no fault or to all the fault of parents, you know what I mean? Like it's a parent's, if they're not doing it, then it's hard to teach the child to do it. Or I was different
Mm-hmm.
than, because I was so frustrated with not having that type of conversation in my own home. I was yearning for it. So I set out to find all the tools to be a better communicator. And I'm still checked and challenged, but because I have a foundation of tools to use, because I sought them, because I wanted to talk to people better and
Mm-hmm.
understand them, then, and I know me
Mm-hmm.
asking probing questions to people in a mere conversation like what you and I are having, so like to be a teacher is
Mm-hmm.
challenging for them because they're not typically surrounded by that. So if you're going to take this journey on as taking moves towards taking responsibility, you're going to check and challenge pretty much everybody
Mm-hmm.
around you, because they're not used to either being
Mm-hmm.
held accountable for their own stuff because they've already placed blame, or vice versa, right? Like being the blamed is also a role in this society. So
I love how you just said checked and challenged,
thanks.
because I, well, really, that really resonated with me, because I was thinking, if we're not checked and challenged, then we're not growing.
Correct.
So we almost want to strive to be checked and challenged. And if you're not checked and challenged, then again, where can you look in the mirror? Where can you facilitate some growth in your life? Because I feel like that's a really good sign. Feeling uncomfortable means that you're growing and you're going to the next level, like you're leaning in rather than retreating. So and I tried to do that really young with my children, and it was, or my students, I called them my kids at the time. And it was strange that I didn't initially think to do that with my own children. It was like, well, where were they going to get it from?
Right.
I've done it with my kids all my life. And then I had my own kids and just thought, what, they would just have this ability.
Yeah, it's a gene. You just
Right.
birthed it to them.
And that's where I was checked and challenged, though. And that's where I had to step back and say, why am I constantly having this miscommunication with my children? Because as a parent, I knew it has to be me. They're just this reflection. So then I had to dig deeper and be like, okay, what am I doing wrong? Where am I not communicating more correctly? And realizing it needs to be more concrete. And it's not totally fixed. It's not like we always remember to write it down, but it definitely gives us a tool.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I am nowhere near perfect, despite the fact that I can spew all the times that I have um, utilize the tools, I have fallen short from them as well. Even last night, like literally this happened last night with, I was so affected by something. And when you're in such close quarters with people that sometimes it's not okay to speak right away. I'd probably say something I regret. I have a very quick and sharp tongue. I know that, but I also know how to keep it under wrap because I take responsibility, or at least I try to. You know what I mean? So like this is a constant being present, assessing all the situations at all times. Like it's exhausting the level of which I play in this field, and I still fall short. So which is fun because I continue to grow from there, right? Like, oh, I thought I was right. Pretty clear.
If you weren't falling short, or if you still weren't challenged, then I don't think you'd be growing. And I just personally think that's the whole point in life, is to not have, it is to figure things out along the way for our children, for the legacy, you know, to leave something good here, possibly for our soul's growth, depending on what you believe, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So ultimately, yeah, if you guys have not seen that movie on Disney Plus yet, Soul.
Oh gosh, it's so good. We watched it the night it came out.
Yeah, it's so good. And it just kind of makes me think, you know, when you start doing the personal work and it gets hard and it can get messy and it can get ugly, and then it can be like, well, what's the whole point? Watch the movie Soul.
Right. And then our podcast ends. Like we have no
But I think it'll just make sense. You know, it'll make the growth, the work worth it. I've always been very curious about people that I'm surrounded by that have no yearning, no inkling to grow whatsoever. Conversations aren't ever any more depth than a new recipe, or
exactly.
Yeah, a new recipe, what they had for lunch, or what they're going to wear, or the next trip. But there's never any, why is this all happening? And I don't know. Since I've been a very little, since I can remember, since I have memories, my mind has always gone to, I wonder why I'm here. When I think I shared with you once, maybe even on a podcast, that I was just obsessed with changing bodies with somebody. I was laying in bed and contemplate, what would it be like if they were my mom? What kind of experience would that be? And how would that have shaped me differently? I wonder if I could like teletransport into their body for a day.
Yeah.
And because I felt like, how would that shape our experiences to be so different? And then when I'm around people that don't have the same inklings, not that you have to ask the same questions I did, but just to think like, why is this all happening? Or what am I here to learn? It baffles me.
Me too.
My brain just does not work that way. So take responsibility, people. Look in the mirror. Ask some questions.
Because, and you could, like any book, in yoga, we have what's called the yamas and the niyamas, and there are, there's 5 of each. So it's similar to what people know as the 10 Commandments of
in the Bible.
Yoga. Yeah. But I feel like I've taught them to students for years now. And every time, like I could tell you ahimsa, which is kindness or non-harming, but every time I revisit the subject, that there's always a deeper level for it. The word is kindness, right? Or non-harming. It depends on your translation. The more feminine view of it is kindness. But like, how many different ways or levels or understanding of it? Like it starts with, most people understand it if you are just starting in, is being a vegan or vegetarian as a yogi, which that's the immediate go-to response. But then we dug deep, and like I said earlier, is that people aren't intending on harming. They're just not intending on harming themselves. But at the same time, they're actually harming themselves. And there's always a choice. Every single moment, there's a choice to either enlighten yourself or elevate your consciousness or your vibration, or move backwards. And I hate to use that word backwards because it's not really that. It's just recede into more reptilian, primal choices, which we as humans are so complicated and so intricate that we have this choice to either recess or progress, right? Like it's
right, and there's
always
nothing wrong with it. I think it's protection. when you
Yeah, of
bring up the
course.
reptilian. So, and I've realized that with a couple of people in particular that has really bothered me, that I'm not seeing growth, because when you grow, it's so fun to grow together. And I think that's one of the reasons we were initially just attracted to each other, because we do have such different backgrounds, like we've talked about in doing this podcast, but we are on a search for growth and just to become better people and to help others. I think we both are very drawn to helping others. And when I see other people that I've been very close to and love not propelling forward or interested or wanting to grow, it used to bother me until I took responsibility and really looked at that and thought, why is that bothering me? And then went even farther and put myself in their shoes, in their bodies, through their lens, and realized it's that protection, it's self-preservation,
It's comfy.
it's comfy, right? And it's scary to grow. And just like we were just talking, if you're not always nudging or feeling uncomfortable, then you're really not growing. And some people just choose not to feel uncomfortable, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay until it's not, Laura.
Until it's not, which
And
is
I say that because we
you're
all
right.
listening to this are in the midst of a pandemic. And
Yeah.
I don't think anybody, with very few exception, because I can't poll everybody, but I don't think anybody with very few exception is comfortable right now. And the point is like and I teach this too with the yamas and the yamas, is that I purposely make myself uncomfortable with things that I get very comfortable with, like having the dishes done before I go to bed, or making sure the bed's made every day. And these are things that are genuine comforts for me that I enjoy doing. But if I take it away, I start to feel something. And
Me
what I
too.
right, and then what I start to feel is the need to control. Like I can start to unravel the the things that we get very comfortable in life with, which is a way to protect ourselves from feeling anything, regardless of what it is. And so I know sometimes that, like, I've heard people and seen tragic stories where the ability to do some of these things, like clean the dishes or make your bed, is taken away from you. You know, you break an arm, God forbid, but like things happen, and that you're not only are you dealing with the thing that has been taken from you, but now you're also dealing with the energy that you can't do the things that have once made you comfortable. So I feel like that's what the pandemic has done for us, is just wiped at least
Yeah.
a level of comfort away, to where you can see people around you who lived pretty comfortably are struggling with the discomfort of
Mm-hmm.
change, just in general. Like, these people eat the same thing every night, and they know exactly what TV shows they're watching, and they take the same route home from work, etc., etc. And now they're like, I have to do school online, or you know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's to make these ever so slight adjustments to life that nobody's ever done this before, but you can tell that some people are adjusting better than others, simply because they've leaned into discomfort, I believe, more often
Mm-hmm.
than not. It prepares them.
Yeah. And a lot of times, I don't think that we're ready for any type of change or any type of self reflection until we're literally pushed into that corner where it's not okay.
Right. Where you're in the middle of it.
Right. And so possibly, just possibly, everything happens for a reason. And so possibly there's some good that will come out of the discomfort that we are feeling during this pandemic. I know that I've had some good things come out of it for me.
I have, very much so. It has been the most uncomfortable uh, and the most peaceful at the exact same time, if that makes any sense for
Mm-hmm.
me. I have laid in bed on numerous occasions with my thumb in my mouth in fetal position and bawling, to a place where it's so cathartic. But I think if I had to do this pandemic differently, where I was one of the essential workers that had to go to work, and I didn't get the time to actually be in the midst of observing all that's going on, I couldn't have my thumb in my mouth and in fetal position while helping
Mm-hmm.
people out with their bags. You know what I mean? Or not touching
Yeah.
bags, because it's a pandemic. But
Yeah.
I'm I'm grateful and floored constantly through
Yeah.
this.
I remember being very, I don't know if the jealous is the right word, envious, but when I was going through the very, very traumatic phase of Will's accident, like not even losing memory, even, on life support, and being pregnant and having another child to take care of. It was just a lot. And people would say to me, oh, you have to take the time to grieve. And what are you learning from this experience? And I've realized that I had no time to grieve whatsoever, but I processed just in another way. So I would think that these essential workers, especially I'm thinking hospital workers,
Yeah.
you know, have the process and learned many, many lessons in a way that will be like, whoa, you know, when it calms a little bit
Yeah, I
as
think there's a
well.
daily, I mean, if they're I don't know, nobody knows how they're all doing it, but there's a daily, they have to be debriefed and or briefed and
Mm-hmm.
debriefed, and there's a process that they do just to stay
Mm-hmm.
fairly sane in the hospital. But then I feel
Right.
like once they're able to rest, and
Mm-hmm.
I pray,
That's when it
I,
hits you.
yeah,
When you can rest, that's when it hits you because you can't rest. And you're like, why I have this time to rest, but you've been in fight or flight for so long, and then your adrenals are just so fatigued that at that point you can't just like go right into rest. It's got to be like a ladder, where you step down a
yeah.
little bit so you can get to that point,
Yeah, it's the
the
same reason that
debriefing.
people get sick on vacation is because they've gone
Yeah.
so hard, so fast, so long
Yeah.
that when they finally like take the load off, that they're like, "Why am I sick?"
Exactly.
Probably should
Exactly.
take more vacations or not work so hard. I don't know. Who knows?
I don't know, but I do have some crystal suggestions
Please do.
for
Yeah.
taking responsibility to inject that in here. And I was looking for some of them before Jamie and I started this podcast, and I looked very hard for it because it must be the most important one in my mind is Aquamarine. This is a really pale greenish one if you are watching the video, not just listening. Aquamarine is the stone of courage. It helps to open up your throat center or your throat chakra, whatever you call it, but about speaking up, using your voice and having the courage to take the responsibility to say those words. As I was saying earlier in the podcast, I think it's really important to say them out loud. If, for example, you've had a conflict with somebody and you do some self reflection and you're ready to take ownership for your part that you brought to it, Aquamarine really helps with the courage because it's very hard to do.
It is.
The next one is rose quartz. Loving yourself through it, accepting yourself through it, knowing that your intention, as Jamie has shared with us, it's not coming from an ill place when you're taking the responsibility, and knowing that that you still are worthy of your love and other people's love. So being gentle with yourself. And I really wanted to do labradorite,
Mhm.
just for those that are looking as well. It's very reflective and it helps you to dig deep and see some subconscious issues, some buried issues. So when you're ready to take responsibility, but on a deeper level, because sometimes we don't even know, this is a great stone to use, like when meditating, sleeping, journaling, to wear, to work with, and keep around you when you're ready to dive deep and to do those work.
That's a good
To do
suggestion.
those work, to do the work.
I didn't even hear you say that. That's funny enough.
So those would be my top three.
So as you were talking about rose quartz, and I thought about this for anybody who's on Facebook. Red Table Talks is the Jada Pinkett Smith series that she does videos with her. There's the three generations, her mom and her daughter. There is one that Will Smith does on his own with a therapist, and he goes back to reconcile with Aunt Viv from The Fresh Prince when he was on it. And if nobody is either old enough to remember or understand what happened, but it was scandalous. Like there was a really big one day there was Aunt Viv, and then there was another Aunt Viv the next day. And there was a whole lot of like heat that built up. Well, they just had a reunion. All of this the fluff doesn't matter, but the way that Will handled reconciling with Aunt Viv prior to the reunion, because he didn't want that whole elephant in the room, to doing that, like he needed to make some reconciliation. I highly, highly suggest that watch because he handles it so well. Like it's it's mind-blowing where he takes responsibility. He listens to her speak, no matter how painful the story is or was, but he was a young kid trying to survive. And so then after, like, he brings the therapist with them. You don't see her, but you hear in the beginning that she goes. And then afterwards, he's sitting with the therapist, revisiting what had happened. And then so she goes a little deeper to help Will understand why he was being the jerk of a 21-year-old that he was.
Did he see it?
Everybody put him on his pedestal. Huh? Oh, yeah.
Did he see it? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And he was like, my mom did this and my dad did this. Like, he pinpointed how he learned this behavior, and he was just trying to survive. And it's a very common story. He just happened to be in the spotlight. You know what I mean? And so there was fame included, and there was all this media. It wasn't social at the time, but it was certainly, the newspapers and magazines published it constantly because it was something to talk about. But there were 2 lives at stake. And then, they go into the deeper aspects where she was a Black woman who was portrayed as this crazy woman, and it lost her entire career. So there's so many things where, on both sides of all of this stuff is that if we take responsibility for our own, we kind of set each other free. And this expressed it in, 30 minutes of a beautiful, plus it was nice to see a man get into this really heartfelt space and to be open to listening. Because I don't feel like that's exposed enough. I know that men do it. I just don't think that it's often exposed. And so I hope that he turns a trajectory on that as well. It's beautiful. If not, I don't think it's YouTubeable. I think they're exclusively on Facebook. So borrow somebody's account.
Yeah, and then definitely.
I feel like if I were to say if there's one thing to do to start taking responsibility is I'll go back to notice or listen. Don't have to change it at first, but I would say notice how often you say someone makes you feel or do a certain way or thing. Like, just hear it. And now that I've said it, like, it's probably going to be more on your horizon anyway of anybody listening, is how often they're going to hear themselves say, you make me feel, or you made me do certain things. And once you start hearing it, then you can choose to change the trajectory of the thought and just take responsibility. I feel a certain way when you're around.
Right. Change it, or just at least start looking at it.
Yeah. I think that's where it has to start. It doesn't have to be an egregious. I remember telling a couple girls, I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, but when I did some restorative justice work in a middle school, and the woman I was working with was their teacher, and she said, "Will you tell this person you're sorry?" And the girl immediately said yes, and I kicked my friend under the table, and I was like, whoa. Like, I don't really think people are apt to take the responsibility to genuinely say that they're sorry for anything as big as what had happened for the 2 of these girls. So much as I'm like, this girl's probably never apologized for stealing a pencil because she's in 8th grade or 7th grade or something. So, like, I don't think jumping into taking deep responsibilities with large open, wounds within the family or friends that you might have is the right thing to start with, because it'll get real messy real quick. But this is small stepping stones. Start listening to how often you give your power away to people. If you make me feel a certain way, then you have no power. And then that person is moving you like a puppet, Yeah,
it could get real messy real quick. But if you do see that come up, don't turn away from it either. Maybe just at least start writing about it before you want to go up and talk to them, because those unfortunately are the things that we start to notice first. And we start to notice the big things before we notice the small, subtle things. And the more we pay attention, then we start to notice the smaller, subtle things. So if it's something really big that you do need to take responsibility for, maybe not shy away from it, but at least start writing it down. Start looking at it, start getting curious about it, and learn. Learn the best way to do it.
I remember, I have to say, I remember I was closing my last yoga studio, and about a week before the doors were actually going to be closed, there was a student she is lovely and removed at the same time. Like, she, you could tell she has a heart of absolute gold. And at the same time, she had a lot of walls to keep you from it. Like, you could just see and sense it. And so I was sitting at the desk like I typically did. And she came over to the desk and she had said something very kind that was very heartwarming and very heartfelt. So it doesn't mean somebody has to offend you, because this is where I'm going with this. She was not offensive to me at all. She was actually being very kind. And I thought in the moment I needed to be stoic. And as well as I thanked her, is that I wasn't really absorbing, and I could see it and feel it. Like there was this weird, like everything she was saying was bouncing off my armor. I could just like watch it all play out. And I felt like a jerk because she was exposing a part
Trying
of
to be
herself,
nice.
right? And so she walked out the door and the door shut. And I said, you got to say something because you just got to say something. So I got out my phone and I text her. So it's a little impersonal, I understand, but I also needed to take responsibility for not letting her in when she deserved it. And I deserved to feel those warm, cuddly things. I just didn't feel like breaking down yet again in another cry in front of many people, right? So I sent her this really, I know what you were trying to say and I appreciate it, and far better and more, carefully thought out words, that I actually was genuinely grateful for what she was saying. And then her response turned into, I don't know how to take a compliment either. So when I genuinely loved her back and genuinely thanked her back, we text,
She did
like
the
her
same
text
thing.
back. So she did the same thing. And I just laughed and I was like, oh, I see you. Like something happened. And then we both went and like
Yeah.
at one point or the other. It was really great. So like, just, it could be texted, it could be done over Zoom, it could be in a journal, but I think just starting the process of like digging in there, feeling something.
Yeah. And
So
it might,
funny.
maybe getting messy is okay too,
Oh yeah, for
might
sure.
be part of the process. I know I've had many messy, take responsibilities. So
Yeah.
messy, everything really.
Yeah.
It's kind of part of it. So, I mean, what would I clean up? I love to clean. I'm just
Oh
kidding.
goodness
I'm just kidding.
gracious. That's so funny.
I'm
When
just
I
kidding.
clean up. That's
All
good.
right. Well, until next time. And again, guys, leave us a comment. Let us know what resonated, what you think, your taking responsibility story, and what you would love to hear us chat about next time.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
All right, till next time. See you
All
then.
right. Bye.
See you.